All right. Bruchim Habayim, thank you very much for joining us tonight for the learning of Hilchot Shabbat as we continue to the next Melacha of Hilchot Shabbat, and we are almost done. It's a very big accomplishment. We are almost done with the 39 Melachot that are forbidden to do on Shabbat. We have tonight, B'ezras Hashem, we're going to be doing Melechet Mav'eer, which is the prohibition against lighting a fire on Shabbat, and all of the things that are under that category, which leaves us with Mechaber, which is Kibui, the Melacha of extinguishing, and then finally Hotza'ah, which is the Melacha of carrying from one domain to the other. So that means we're almost there. Now, there are plenty of other areas to learn as well. We need to talk about, we have more things to talk about in the laws of Muktzeh, Refuah on Shabbat, different halachot about Kiddush and about Havdalah. And I mean, lots more areas of halacha to talk about. But as far as the 39 melachot are concerned, we are almost there. Almost there. So that's a very big accomplishment. And that's a good thing to come into the new year with. That's a really nice thing to be able to come into the new year saying, Hashem, I care so much about Shabbat. I came to Shiur all year long to learn about how to do Hilchot Shabbat, how to keep Shabbat properly, to make you happy. And that should be a tremendous zechut for a sweet and healthy and happy new year, B'ezras Hashem. Amazing. Okay, let's go. So, Melechet Mav'eer, the Melacha of lighting a fire. This Melacha is one of the only Melachot the Torah specifically mentions. It's really amazing. If you go throughout the entire Torah, and we know there are 39 forbidden labors to do on Shabbat, but none of them are stated explicitly, with the exception of lighting a fire. It says, Lo tiva'aru esh bechol moshevotechem b'yom HaShabbat. You shall not light a fire in any of your dwelling places on Shabbat. That's the only one the Torah specifies. There's a big discussion. One place says you can't plow and you cannot harvest, but there's a question if that's talking about Shabbat or if it's talking about the Shemitah year, the 7th year, sabbatical year. You can't harvest and take and plant the fruits of Israel during that year. But this is one that everybody agrees. The Torah specifically says you cannot light a fire on Shabbat. Okay? Very good. So it's undisputed, no question that it's asur to do that. The Zohar Kadosh says that it's very important to realize that when it says don't light a fire on Shabbat, it actually is referring to even not just the prohibition against actually lighting a fire, which of course it means that, but it also refers to the idea that you can't get angry on Shabbat. Shabbat Kodesh is supposed to be a time where there's no fight, no machloket. It's supposed to be Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom means peace. Peace in the home, right? It's supposed to be a peaceful Shabbat. No disputes, no arguments, no fights, right? The Yetzer Hara wants to make a lot of fights between people. And it causes it to happen at the worst times that are supposed to be the most peaceful, makes all kinds of fights happen when they should not happen. So you have to be on guard to make sure that you're on your game. If you see yourself starting to get upset because whatever may have happened, your husband came in with his shoes on, dirty up the whole entire house, and you've told him a million times and he didn't listen to you, right? So now you want to let him have it. Got to be on guard. Say no. Shabbat Shalom. It's supposed to be Shabbat of peace, right? So that's what the Zohar says. Don't light a fire on Shabbat. Don't let there be machloket, especially, by the way, for Rosh Hashanah. God forbid to get mad on Rosh Hashanah. Somebody gets you upset, somebody gets you mad with it, zip it, right? And that we tell that to the men as well, because you cannot get mad on Rosh Hashanah. It's a sign for the whole year. Whatever happens in the head of the year, that's a sign for the entire year. So therefore, no anger, God forbid, on Rosh Hashanah. So let's talk about the halachot. Here we go. So to actually light a fire is forbidden. To fuel a fire is forbidden. Let's say you want to add wood to a fire. You want to pour oil into an existing flame, gas onto a fire, lighter fluid, right? That's forbidden, right? If you want to fan a flame, go over to a flame and you want to wave the, paper plate at it to make it go bigger, welcome. That's forbidden. Can't do that. If you want to open up a door to let some wind onto a flame to make it grow bigger or to blow on it, you cannot do that. Not supposed to create even sparks. Can't even make a fire through a magnifying glass. Let's say you want to take a magnifying glass and put it in the sunlight and then cause, the grass underneath to start smoking. It's called making a fire. Can't do that. Okay, good. Okay, let's go. So far, so good? Okay. The big question of our generation, it's really a question for the previous generations, but definitely it applies to our generations, is the question of electricity. That's the big question. Is electricity considered to be a fire on Shabbat? There are many different opinions in this matter. What is the problem with electricity? The poskim talk about the idea that electricity could be considered a fire. According to some, that's exactly what it is. It's a form of a flame, meaning it's a form of something which is considered a derivative of a flame, similar kind of thing, similar category, which therefore is prohibited. Some want to say that actually, when you complete a circuit, this was the opinion of the Chazon Ish, that's makeh b'patish. We learned makeh b'patish, right, guys? Remember that? Makeh b'patish was the final blow, the final thing that sealed or that created the vessel, right? So, like you had some kind of imperfection, you perfected it. That was called makeh b'patish. If you have something that was not yet finished and you completed it, that was makeh b'patish. So, simple idea of closing a circuit to complete it, which would then turn on a light, according to the Chazon Ish, was actually makeh b'patish, the completion of that circuit. Be it as it may, either way you look at it, whether you consider it to be a fire, whether you consider it to be something which is makeh b'patish, the finalizing of an item, the electricity may not be used on Shabbat. In other words, by you on Shabbat. You know that we can have the lights on before Shabbat, but not on Shabbat. Or you could set a timer from before Shabbat, right? You cannot deal with it yourself on Shabbat because that would be considered in many areas lighting a fire. I'll give you an example.
Makeh b'patish means to light a fire.
No. Makeh b'patish means to finalize an act, to complete something that was incomplete, to perfect something that was imperfect, right? Lighting a fire is Mav'eer, right? Mav'eer. Now, let's go. So, Rav Chaim Ozer Gruzensky, when electricity came out, this was pre-war Europe. You had incandescent lights. Now, incandescent lights had in them this metal rod in the middle of the light that would get red hot when it would turn on. So he wanted to show everybody that, in his opinion, this was considered to be a fire. So he wouldn't light on Motzei Shabbat Havdalah, when you have to use a candle for a fire to say Borei Merah Ish. He wouldn't use a candle. He would stick his hand up to the light bulb and go Borei Merah Ish to show everyone that this is real fire. The rod that gets red hot is considered to halachically be called fire. Now, that's in the old light bulbs, but as you see above us, we don't have those light bulbs anymore. We've got these, I'm not sure if these are LEDs or if these are, not exactly sure what kind of light bulbs these are. So it's not the same because you don't have that hot rod of metal that's burning hot that gets the halachic status of a fire. But it still is rabbinically prohibited, the LED lights and the, what's those other kind of lights called? I forgot. Those long ones. Forgot.
In hospitals, they have little lights.
Little electric candles
Little
does that count for lighting your candles for Shabbat? It's the best you can do because you can't actually light a fire in a hospital.
But is it okay to do that?
you're exempt. If you can't light a fire there, you're exempt. But so the best you could do is do one of those little electric, things. Okay, good. Fine. So far so good. Everyone clear? If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. Okay, so electricity is something that we do not use on Shabbat because we consider it to be like a fire or makeh patish. What else? So the telephone, same idea, microphones, electric doorbells, right? Interesting question came up. What happens if you ring a doorbell by mistake and you realize that your finger's on the doorbell? When you pull it off, you'll make the bell ring. So I saw an interesting question. What you could do, as we learned in the past, shinui. If you do the melacha with a shinui, it already downgrades it to a lower level. So if you pull it off in a weird way, and you do the melacha in a weird way, that would actually make it much better. So it's not actually doing it in the normal way. That's called shinui, as we learned in the past.
So electronics is derabanan?
So it depends. Sometimes it depends. There are different opinions. Some hold it's derabanan, some hold it's deraita. Most appliances people hold are derabanan. Some hold it's deraita, like I was saying, like to plug an appliance into the wall. But some are machmir. Yeah, some are machmir. They say it's deraita too. So there are different opinions out there. But either way.
So someone could unplug a plug on Shabbat in a weird way?
No. Nobody's allowing you to do that. The question was over here, the person by mistake put their finger on the doorbell by accident. They didn't mean to, but now they're stuck. If they pull it off, which they have no choice, they're not going to stand there the whole Shabbat like that. So how are they going to do that? The answer is do it with a shinui, change it, pull it in a weird way, do something weird. That shouldn't be the normal way of removing your finger. That was the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. So lots of different electronics with microphones. So obviously that's why we don't use a microphone on Shabbat in shul or whenever we have the shul on Shabbat or Yom Kippur, we never use a microphone for that reason because it's called using electricity. Okay.
Some synagogues have goyim use vacuums to vacuum, and clean the synagogue.
Yeah.
On Shabbat, is that okay?
So the answer is yes. The reason is because the synagogue could care less. The answer is that it's fine because synagogues are not instructing the goyim to use the vacuum cleaner. The goy decides to use it because it makes his life easier or her life easier. So it's not something that the shul is telling them to do. Understand? They choose to use it for their own convenience. We don't have to stop them. As far as we're concerned, we just want to clean. Take a broom and sweep it. We didn't tell you to do melacha. The only time it's a problem is if it makes so much noise that it disturbs the people. Like if it's in the middle of davening, they're vacuuming, that's not pleasant. It's a disrespect to the Shabbat for the people that are there. But if everyone leaves and they want to vacuum, no problem.
But in more Orthodox places, I don't see that.
Well, so research a little bit more.
No, does it matter? Does it matter?
No, it's okay. Ask around if you want. Ask those rabbis who think they don't do it, if they allow their cleaning ladies to do it. Ask around. I'm sure you'll be surprised. Okay, let's go. Baby monitors. Zashem, all of you guys should have babies, Zashem, at the right time, and you should have monitors there to check on the baby if the baby's crying, to be able to hear it. What about on Shabbat? Right? So the thing is, when you come into the room, if you start speaking to the baby, so then your voice can be heard in the other room, right? So what do you do for that? So some say just put something on the mic to cover it when it's speaking to the baby, so that it doesn't go into the other room. Okay, obviously, Abutai, remember the very important golden rule of the Torah, pikuach nefesh doche Shabbat, which means when there is a matter of life and death, there's no question that you do anything and everything in order to save the person's life. There's no question about it, which of course includes picking up the phone and calling an ambulance or Hatzalah. 718-230. What's the rest of the number? 1,000 in record timing. Amazing. You should know, it was Rosh Hashanah maybe 4 years ago. I had an old lady here in the shul, very old, that I guess she fainted. Very old woman. I don't know what happened. And I wanted everybody to see that when the rabbis teach us that pikuach nefesh doche Shabbat or Yom Tov, they mean it. So I went, got my cell phone in front of the whole shul, turned it on, and dialed for Hatzalah, and they came, Baruch Hashem, and that was that.
Do you have to do any of this with a shinui, or it doesn't?
No shinui, no nothing. You pick it up, you dial as fast as you can, and make it happen. And funny enough, they wanted to take her to the hospital. She refused. So he's stubborn. No, yeah, didn't want to go. Not having it. Not going. Baruch Hashem, she's okay. She's still alive and well. All is good. May she be well. But she wasn't hearing of it. No hospital for me. Not on Rosh Hashanah. Okay. I had doctors that told me you have to call an ambulance. I said, okay, fine. No question. Okay. Good. So therefore, it's important to be aware that even if you just suspect an emergency, like if you know the person is, let's say you know that person that's calling you on the phone again and again and again is an observant person, right? And you know they would never call you on Shabbat. They would never call you on Yom Tov. But they're calling you. You see the caller ID. So you're suspecting, wow, maybe this is life and death. Boom, pick up the phone. Do what you got to do. Because even if you're just suspecting that it might be a life and death thing, let's say they're calling you many, many, many times in the middle of the night, and you need to, you're afraid. Maybe they need you for some kind of emergency for, again, pikuach nefesh. If you're thinking maybe this might be pikuach nefesh, you're allowed to answer the phone. You understand? Because it, God forbid, could be something. By the way, if you're unsure whether it is pikuach nefesh or not, let's say you don't know whether this is considered to be life-threatening or not, but in your mind, maybe it is. So then you do it anyway. In other words, even if it's a little bit of a doubt, you do it. You call the ambulance, or you do whatever. You drive the car to save the life. There's no question. Like, for example, a lot of times people don't realize certain things could be life-threatening. Like, for example, there was once a girl. She was riding on her bike. She was going fast down a hill, and she fell off, and she flew off the bike, unfortunately, and she broke her arm. Literally broke her arm. Her bone snapped in half. It was really, really sad. Now, you might say, well, that's an arm. It's not a life-threatening thing. It's just her arm. Try and wrap it up or do something. I've been told by professionals, no, that is incorrect, because God forbid if that bone maybe ripped a nerve, or not a nerve, maybe ripped a vein of some sort, and there's interior bleeding, internal bleeding, it could be a disaster if it's not treated properly, and it could even be life-threatening. So therefore, you don't mess with that. No questions asked. If you think that if it's like something like that, you need to call Hatzalah, and you have to do it. I was told by professionals better to call Hatzalah than to drive yourself. I've been told that by Hatzalah. I don't know. I'm talking about from a medical perspective, how they wrap it up or how they do something could be better the way they do it than the way that we would do it. I'm not sure. I have to ask again just to clarify. But that's what they told me. That's better to just call them to do it than us doing it. That's what I was told. If you know anything else, unless you're a professional, I mean, you're a medical professional, right? Right? What do you know? What do you think?
About calling Hatzalah?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I'm trying to think, because we just called them recently, a few Shabbats ago. Like, for example, like Rabbi Levy being on board, like he was able to tell us like halachically what to do, as opposed to like if we just walked into the hospital, I don't think we would have known what to do with like the double doors and everything. I don't remember if they wrap stuff in a different way, but I think it's definitely like more easy.
No, because they were telling in this situation people that this guy, he drove his daughter to the hospital. They told him you should have called us and we would have taken her, because we would have been more careful or would have done something differently than you, because you don't know exactly what you're doing, something like that.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what the case was. Maybe there was something that they could have done more like.
Yeah, I don't know either. I have to figure it out. So I guess it depends on how urgent it is. It depends on a lot of different things. But either way, you do what has to get done and you don't hesitate for a moment. Just get the job done. Okay. Big question that comes up always are the Shabbat elevators. Shabbat elevators are elevators that make a stop every floor of the building. And the question that comes up is, when you enter the elevator, is your weight causing the elevator to work harder? In other words, is it going to have to exert more electricity? Is that the result of your doing or not? The poskim say that the bottom line is that we try to avoid Shabbat elevators because it's a very complicated halachic discussion. Going up apparently is more of a lenient thing than going down. Very interesting. But if you ever need to use it, you should consult a Rav. But ideally, unless the person is very old or very weak or very, not just incapable of walking, we tell people to not use the Shabbat elevators at all. If it's in a situation where it's just not possible, like for example, for some odd reason, the person decided to get a hotel room on the 57th floor of the skyscraper, and it's like way too hard to, right? So then I would tell the person, because of the crazy situation that he's in, just have a goy push the button for you, 57th elevator, and that's it. Right? Yeah.
Like in Stern, they were like, I had friends who lived on the 20th floor of our dorms, and we had a Shabbat elevator. Like, would it have been better for them to just walk?
Yeah, ideally. True.
So they couldn't have used a Shabbat elevator?
It's not the best thing to use. It's a whole big halachic mess. Yeah. Shabbat elevators are not really the best thing. Most poskim that you will talk to will tell you it's better to avoid using the Shabbat elevator. Unless you really can't walk. Or very old or sick or something. Okay, automatic doors at a hospital. So you just talked about that. So what do you do for that case? So don't step on the thing and have the doors open for you because you're causing them to open. But what do? You have to stand around waiting for a few minutes and then have the guy walk in front of it. They open, then you just kind of slide right in. I've done that plenty of times. Unfortunately, it's been a little bit of a, wait, but what can you do? Or you can arrange before Shabbat that, or to find out where are the non-automatic doors. Believe it or not, hospitals still have them. So I went to a hospital like that. LIJ at the time still had it, or North Shore still had it. So they're there. You just got to find them. You want to try and do not walk past motion sensor lights. These lights sometimes go on all the time when you walk by them, and that's a problem. What if you have a light that whenever you walk by, let's say you're walking to your house, and whenever you walk by, the light goes on. Friday night, you walk by, and that light over there is going to turn on. I had a light over here that was like that. It was so annoying. So I had to cross the street to walk to the other side, and then walk by that house so that it would be far away enough that it wouldn't turn on. But let's say that it's inevitable. You go here, it turns on. You go there, it turns on. So then what do you do? So the answer is it depends on whether or not the area is well lit. Why does it depend on that? If it's well lit, then the fact that light turns on is a psik reisha de lo nichale. Right? Who remembers what that means?
That you don't care about. It doesn't matter to you.
Correct. It's a psik reisha, meaning it's something that you don't have in mind, but will be the inevitable result of what you're doing. But we cannot say that you want that to happen because you don't need it to happen at all. It's something which is just going to not really do anything for you in the first place. You already have plenty of light. But if it's a place that there is no light, and this is actually giving you light, then you're in trouble. Because now you can't say lo nichale. So therefore, when it's a well-lit area and there's no other choice but to walk past it and it's going to turn on, we say it's okay because it's psik reisha de lo nichale. But, and it's also probably the kind of light that's only the Rabbanan, so therefore it's okay. When it comes to a non-well-lit area, there's really no choice. Believe it or not, the poskim say if you really have no choice but to walk in such a place, don't benefit from the light, close your eyes. It's a tough thing to do, I admit, because how could you do that? You need to see where you're walking. So better to try and make different arrangements for Shabbat. Okay. Battery operated appliances, flashlights, calculators, etc. All these things we do not use on Shabbat because, again, battery operated is similar, just a miniature electricity type of thing going on, and therefore it's forbidden. Big question that comes up is hearing aids. We know that people use hearing aids on Shabbat. Poskim do allow it. Somebody who's an elderly fellow, he has a hearing aid, and we say that he's allowed to use it as long as it was lit before Shabbat. Question that comes up is, does he have to, can he adjust the volume or not? So Chacham Vadia says he could raise the volume if he does it b'shinui. Interesting discussion. Can he replace the battery? So then the answer is that if he needs to replace it, he should have a goy do it. Seems like there's a very big room to be lenient because it's so necessary for the person to be able to hear, and the whole thing to begin with is only rabbinic. So therefore, we're trying to be very lenient. But so the idea is that you have the hearing aid lit before Shabbat, and therefore you'll be okay. Why is it okay for me to speak into a hearing aid? If it's going to be amplified, isn't it like a microphone in a sense in the person's ear, right? So the answer to that is again, since it's only the Rabbanan, I don't intend to speak into the microphone. I'm not trying to. It just happens to be there, right? So again, we would say that this your enomit kaven, it's not something that you have in mind, and therefore it will be okay. All right, guys, are we clear so far? So good. Any questions? We're good. You have a question? Yes.
I'm thinking about the baby monitor.
The baby monitor.
Yeah. Like, are you not even supposed to hear the baby from it? So you're saying like if you go in to speak, are you covering the mic so that you can't even hear the baby?
No, I'm covering the mic so that my voice doesn't go through into the other room. The baby is not responsible for violating Shabbat, so we don't really care.
But like, let's say like in your room that you have baby monitor, you can like hear the baby. Let's say like crying.
Yeah, it's okay. It's the baby breaking Shabbat technically. The baby's the baby, so it doesn't really, right? Okay, good. Cars, that's the big one. Cars are a real violation of Shabbat. The reason is because what happens is the gas is released, the sparks are ignited inside, the gas explodes and combustion, the combustion chamber of the engine, and that causes fire, right? That's what happens. It causes fire. That's 100% this Melacha called Mav'eer, lighting a fire thousands of times a minute. That's what happens every time that you turn on the engine of a car. So, therefore, cars are not allowed to be used on Shabbat or on Yom Tov. That's the reason that cars are forbidden, because the combustion that occurs inside of them is a serious chilul Shabbat. It's literally making a fire. Okay, so that's why we don't use those cars on Shabbat. Very important. Did I tell you this story about the guy that I heard speak at 770 one time? Did I ever tell you that story? No? Very interesting thing. I want to point out something as we head towards Rosh Hashanah. It's important to talk about these things. Can I say the story you asked that? Thanks so much. So I once saw this guy. I was at 770 for Shabbat in Crown Heights. And this guy got up to speak to our group, and he was saying, a fellow with a long beard, he was saying to everyone, you should know, I didn't always used to look like this. He said, I used to be, I used to look very differently, and I even used to not keep Shabbat, he said, so how did I get like this? So he said, I started to learn a little bit about Shabbat. It was very intriguing to me. It's very interesting to me. And I decided that I want to make some kind of effort for Shabbat. So I decided, he says, that on Shabbat, when I drive on the highway, I'll never go past 70. True story, right? And he was doing this for about a whole year. That was his thing. On Shabbat, I don't drive past 70. The following year, he said, I held on very, very well to that idea that I accepted upon myself. And I think this year I could make another improvement. On Shabbat, when I drive on the highway, I don't go past 60. And he didn't. Eventually, he decided that on Shabbat he won't go past 50. So now he's rarely going on the highways on Shabbat anymore, because if you can't go past 50, it's not really, I guess, that worth it. And eventually, maybe a year or two later, he made the decision not to go past 40, past 30, past 20. And then eventually he was like, what am I doing? And he stopped driving on Shabbat. He started to keep Shabbat. So, a person who's taking steps up on the ladder of spirituality, that's a beautiful thing. So this guy in the eyes of Hashem, it's true, he's still driving on Shabbat, but he's not driving past 70. That's a big step for him. That's a very big step up on the ladder. He then decided he's not driving past 60. That's a big step, right? It's still driving. It's still the same Chilul Shabbat. It's still a very, it's still forbidden to do, but on his level, he's taking a step up, which is a very precious thing in the eyes of Hashem. So eventually, HaKadosh Baruch Hu helped him to reach the point where he was able to really keep Shabbat completely, because he's climbing up the ladder. And that's something that we all have to do as we head towards Rosh Hashanah, to climb up the ladder, to take one step at a time and hold on to that step, as small as it may be, and climb up the ladder. Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. Okay, another thing that comes up. I'm sorry, you had a question.
It's okay, it's not important.
Okay, sorry. Okay, surveillance cameras. You're allowed to walk in front of a surveillance camera on Shabbat, even though your picture is appearing on some screen somewhere. That's okay. You didn't have it in mind. You're not. It's through a grama. Meaning it's not really something that you are actively doing. You're being filmed, and that's not considered to be a melacha. Okay. Refrigerators. So there's a big question amongst the poskim about, can you open up the door of the refrigerator while the motor is off? The question, or let's talk about an oven. Can you open the door of an oven while the fire is off, but the cold wind that goes inside may cause the thermostat to turn the fire of the oven on? These are things that are important to think about. So the poskim first deal with the fridge, and they say that, there's obviously, as you know, in Judaism, everything is a debate, everything is a dispute. So there's a good old machloket about, can you open up the door of the fridge if the motor is off? Some say that you should not do that. Why? Because by opening up the door, the warm air goes inside the fridge, hits the thermostat, and causes the fridge to turn on. Thus, you have caused an electrical reaction in the fridge. Problem, right? Others argue, and they say, no, it might be true, but that's what we would call a grama. Grama means it's an indirect result of your action, and it's something that you didn't even have in mind to do, and not necessarily is it even going to happen, right? Because sometimes it will happen, so sometimes you open the fridge and it won't happen at all. So therefore, they hold it's eino mitkaven, and that's the halacha. You don't need to be strict about it. If you want to be strict about that, you can be strict, and that's your own beautiful chumrah, but it's not required. You can open up the door of the fridge even if the motor is off. The place to be more strict is by the ovens. If an oven is on with the fire still going, then there's really nothing to be worried about, because the fire is going anyway. The question is, if the oven is on but the fire is off, and you opening up the door would cause cold air to go in, which would turn on the fire, that would literally be making a fire. Sometimes it happens in a very split second, so it's almost the direct result of you opening the door. That is the reason that that these GE and other appliance makers have come up with this idea called Shabbat mode. This is where Shabbat mode comes in. Shabbat mode is there in order to prevent the igniting of a flame in the oven on Shabbat. So what that does is before Shabbat, you put it on Shabbat mode, which means that the flame stays consistent. It doesn't go out, just keeps on going. And it stays at that temperature, regardless of whether you open the door, close the door, just the same thing. So you don't have to worry about it. So if you have a Shabbat mode, that is what you benefit from. By the way, as we learned in the past, Shabbat mode does not mean that you can now put food into the oven on Shabbat at all. As we learned, that's a big problem. It's just to allow you to open the door of the oven on Shabbat in order to be allowed, in order to be able to take food out and not be worried that you're causing a flame to be created. Clear? Yes.
So if you are using an oven without Shabbat mode, you just have to wait to hear the sound running before you open it,
Correct.
and then it's fine.
Yep. Okay, awesome.
Sorry, can you also just repeat why we're more strict with an oven?
The oven is mamash d'oraita.
That's still right, because it's
It's
fire.
it's a
not the
real
fridge.
fire. Yeah, there's no question. It's a real d'oraita. It could really be this mamash, this melacha right here, lighting a fire. Okay. Now, there are sometimes things that are considered making a fire, which you really would never think it's called making a fire, but Chazal deemed it as called making a fire. If you increase the strength of a flame or decrease the strength of a flame, Chazal called that lighting a fire or extinguishing. Even though the flame is still there and it existed before, it's still a problem of lighting or extinguishing. So if, let's say, you tilt a candle to get more oil towards the wick to increase the brightness of the flame, if it were to do that, that would be called lighting a fire. If you were to tilt it the opposite way, which would take away the fuel and decrease the brightness of the flame, Chazal also call that extinguishing too.
What if there's like a danger? What if like the oil with the wick be in like a dangerous position?
Meaning it might light something on fire?
It could break the glass. Like maybe sometimes the wick goes towards the glass and it like hits the glass and it's like breaking the glass with the wick. So in a dangerous situation, one time I asked a boy, but like, are you allowed to fix something if it's
so it depends.
dangerous?
It depends on if you can do something else, like perhaps put something else around it to make it.
No, inside, like if it's inside and if it's like, if it goes towards if it's hitting the glass, if the
So
flame
it
is
depends on
hitting the
if it's seriously dangerous. God forbid, it's going to cause a fire to break out, Khalil v'chas, and it's in your home, then that's something else. But other than that, usually it's not really going to do that. Even if it starts getting black, usually it just stays black. It doesn't
No,
burn
not black, like if there's actually like a cut in the glass.
If it really is shooting out flames, then that's something else. But usually it's not going to be that dangerous, from what I've seen. Okay, now there's a very interesting halacha that comes up in the laws of lighting a flame on Shabbat. This is the halacha called Shema Yateh. Shema Yateh is a decree that the rabbis made against learning, studying, reading by the candlelight on Friday night or whenever it's dark on Shabbat. If you have a candle that is a candle in front of you and you want to sit and study by a book, let's say for some reason the electricity is off, you have a candle and you want to sit and study by the candlelight, Chazal made a rule that you may not sit and study something or learn something new to you, which you need light for. The reason is because of the fear that you may come to take that candle and bring it closer to your learning, to your book. And at that point, you will have tilted the candle thus bringing more fuel to the wick, and therefore you're causing the fire to be brighter. That would be considered making a fire on Shabbat. The two words for that are Shema Yateh. Maybe you are tilting, maybe you will tilt the candle. So the rabbi said you can't even sit and learn Friday night by the candlelight because of the fear that you will come to tilt the candle. That's called Shema Yateh. Have you guys ever heard of Shema Yateh before? No? You've heard about it? Very cool. Okay, very nice. Good. So that's a very important halacha. It doesn't really come up for us that often, but it does. I'll give you an example. In Israel, there are those who do not use electricity on Shabbat at all. In other words, even from before Shabbat, they don't allow any electricity to be used at all. Because what happens is the Israeli power companies are run by Jews, and Jews are creating this energy on Shabbat, and therefore they view that as something which they are not allowed to benefit from. So they simply don't use the lights at all if it's coming from the power company. A lot of people have generators, and they use the generators for Shabbat because they don't want to allow themselves to use the power from the Israeli power companies, being that it's coming from Jews that are violating Shabbat. So the Stipler didn't even use a generator. Stipler, the father of Chaim Kanievsky, did not use a generator at all. He just used his candles. But the Stipler Gaon, alav shalom, didn't stop learning Torah for a second. All he did was learn, and more and more learning. That's what, just like his son of Chaim Kanievsky, alav shalom. They didn't stop learning for a second. The problem is like this. What do you do on Friday night? The rabbi said you can't learn. You can't learn by the candlelight. You might come to tilt it. As a matter of fact, the Talmud tells over a story about the great Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. I'm sure you heard of Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. He was unfortunately the Kohen Gadol who was slaughtered by the hands of the Romans. They peeled his skin off his body. It was a terrible, terrible death that he suffered. And the Gemara also tells us something else about him. Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha was, I think, the only human being that the Torah ever talks about that Hashem himself asked him for a blessing. One of the most interesting things. And he blessed Hashem. He said, Hashem, your mercy should overpower your judgment. Right? That's what he blessed Hashem with. And it says that Hashem nodded his head to his blessing. Very interesting Gemara to say that Hashem asked a human being for a blessing. Very interesting. What?
Why was his skin?
I can't tell you. I don't know. That's what happened. So anyway, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, this great holy tzaddik, righteous man, said, I'm not allowed to learn Friday night, I get it. But they're afraid that I'm going to tilt the candle on Shabbat. No problem. I have a solution. I'll learn Friday night by the light of the candle, and I won't tilt the candle. Very good. That's the whole reason. I won't tilt the candle. No problem. He was learning Friday night. And before you know it, surely enough, the great Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha himself found himself with his candle in his hand, tilted over his book. And he wrote down afterwards, after Shabbat. Unfortunately, the Bet HaMikdash by that point had been destroyed. He said, Ani Yishmael ben Elisha, Yishmael ben Elisha, I read Friday night by the candle, and I tilted the candle. When the Bet HaMikdash will be rebuilt, I will bring a fat sin offering to the Bet HaMikdash as an atonement for my sin. That's what he wrote. Unbelievable. So Chazal knew what they were saying. So therefore, you cannot learn by the candlelight. So the Stipler Gaon, he had people. He had to learn. So the halacha says that if you have people watching you Friday night and they're making sure that you don't touch the candle, so then you're allowed to learn. So you have to have what we call a shomer. Shomer means somebody to watch you to make sure you don't mess up. So he would sit there, and he had his grandsons. His grandchildren would come and watch him to make sure he's not tilting the candle. So he would mess with them. He wanted to see if they were actually watching or if they were in La La Land. So he's going for it. He's pretending to go for the candle. And his grandsons are completely out of it, not watching him at all. And then he starts to give it to them. He says, you guys are supposed to be watching me. You're not watching me. I could have taken the candle and tilted it. You didn't watch me. Matter of fact, amazing. So he got upset at them. Rabbi Yehuda Tzadka, the Rosh Yeshiva of Porat Yosef, it's brought down that he would learn Friday night as well, and his mother, Aleh Shalom, agreed to watch him the whole night until he would stop learning. He would see she's getting tired, and he would say, "Ma, go to sleep." She said, "No, you keep learning." She refused to leave him until he would stop learning. She was a very holy woman. All of her children were Rashei Yeshivot, heads of yeshivas, amazing. She herself, believe it or not, made a siyum on the Zohar. Can you imagine what we're talking about? She is a very holy person. Anyway, that's why her children were great tzaddikim. But that's the story. She was Moseret Nevish Friday night. Who doesn't want to just assume fetal position and go straight into bed, right? That's the way it is, right? No. She says, I'm staying up in order that my son, Rabbi Yehuda Tzadka, can sit and learn Torah. That's a tremendous level. But he wouldn't learn unless he had somebody to watch him. Okay, very good. Are we doing? Okay, let's go. Says the Gemara. So that's called Shema Yateh. So what do you do in a situation, Rabotai, when you're stuck, God forbid, on a highway, on a bus, in a cab? It's right before Shabbat. And as we said, you can't drive on Shabbat because you're doing a great melacha of lighting a fire in the combustion of the car. So I'll tell you a true story. I had a neighbor when we were living in Brooklyn. I had a neighbor that went to visit his daughter in Waterbury, Connecticut. Waterbury, Connecticut is about 2 hours away from here. And in Brooklyn, also around 2 hours away, similar. And they left with a nice amount of time before Shabbat. I think it was must have been 1 p.m. or so. They left early, or maybe 12 p.m. It's a 2-hour drive. They left with 4 hours to go. All of a sudden, it started snowing so bad, and they were stuck on this highway, I-84, for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, not moving anywhere, just stuck. And they realized it's getting really close to Shabbat. And even if they had a completely empty highway at this point, they just wouldn't make it on time. So they called up their rabbi. Their rabbi, who's a big Talmid Chacham, told them, guys, got to find something. Got to do something, find a hotel, do something. Just find somewhere, get off the highway, and go find a place to be for Shabbat. They get off the hotel. They're in the middle of nowhere. There is nothing around them, and it's so super cold. They didn't have where to go. So, very sadly, as they're looking and looking and looking, there's just nothing. There's nothing there. No hotels, no doors to knock on even, just nothing. They call the rabbi again. I told them, okay, I guess you are just going to have to stay in the car the whole Shabbat. So they stayed in the car the entire Shabbat, which is really, 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 really very challenging and very difficult. I felt so bad for them. I asked them if they had any food. They said they had a chalot. They were bringing challahs from Brooklyn to their daughter in Connecticut. Anyway, that was way before Uber, right? That was way before Uber existed. After Uber came into existence, you should know, it's amazing. Smartphones. How old are smartphones even? 14, 15 years? 15 years maybe?
Yes.
That's it. Like 15 years ago, it just came out. You know, so you're talking at a time where even when it just came out, not everybody had a smartphone at the time. So even if there was Uber, they wouldn't, not necessarily would they be able to get it. But the point is, at this point, since you have the option of getting an Uber, if you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you can arrange for the Uber driver to come and to take you and to pay for the, whatever is needed, you pay ahead of time. And the Uber driver can drive you. Again, this is a kind of serious situation. You'd have to pick up your car after Shabbat, wherever you dropped it off. But in that kind of a case where you're stuck with mamash, nowhere to go, and it's a terrible, terrible feeling to be Shabbat like that and to suffer like that over Shabbat in a cold car like that. I would imagine that Chazal would be lenient to ask a goy to do everything for you. So in that case, you'd have the goy drive you, take your bags, open your doors, do everything for you. You don't have to do anything. And have the goy do everything for you. He's the driver, and that way you would resolve the issue. I had a cousin that came to visit me from Lakewood. Same thing happened to him, and he left really early. But it was crazy traffic on the Grand Central and all these places, and he had to just get off. It was right before Shabbat, and he got off. You guys know where Har Torah is? He got off by Har Torah, and he parked his car over there and just started walking. Him and his wife. She didn't even have her like shoes. She was wearing slippers. It was awful. She had to walk all the way. They didn't even know where we lived. They were walking all the way from there to Great Neck. It took them a few hours. We were like, where are they? It was so crazy. So I told him, I said, Tzaddik, order an Uber. Why didn't you order an Uber? It's a guy coming to take you. You'd have to walk like 4 hours. I don't know how long it took him, or maybe 3 hours from that place. In such a case, Chazal, I believe, would be lenient, to allow the guy to have the goy do what he needs to do. Have the Jew, be able to rely on that. Yeah.
What do you do with your phone in that situation? Leave it in the car?
Yeah. You could leave it there. Or you can have the goy carry it for you. You can have the goy take everything out for you. You have to say, listen, for the rights, listen, this is going to be kind of weird, but I'm very sorry. I need you to do everything for us. You have to open the doors for us, carry our stuff, whatever. And I can't really even compensate you for that. Sorry, but this is what it is. I need your help on this one, And that way he can do everything for you. Yeah.
Your phone is in your bag. Is that okay?
What do you mean?
If your phone is in your bag, but you can't carry it anyways.
You can't. You're coming from a place where you're. Let's say you don't have an eruv. You don't have.
Yeah.
It's all whatever. All this stuff is muktzeh anyway. So you really need the goy to just do everything for you.
Okay, but even like in your own home, if you're carrying a bag and it has like electronics in it, is it allowed?
So it's going to depend on what else is in the bag. If there are other things that are more important than the bag, then those things, then that would be, the bag would be basis ledavar ha'asur ve'hamutar. It's a base for that which is prohibited and forbidden and permissible. The permissible stuff is more important than the prohibited, and therefore you could carry the bag.
What if you need its place, but there's only like stuff inside of it, but you need to place it sitting on your bed?
Well, then it would depend on what kind of muktzeh it is. Is it muktzeh that is the lowest level of muktzeh that you could, let's say, move because it's just a hammer or a needle, right? Remember that category is called kli shemelachto yisur. It's a vessel that does a prohibited action. So those you can move if you need their place, right? So then you'd be allowed to move them, right? If it's a passport, if it's a something, well, car key is the other category, which is good. If it's something more severe, shchita knife, brit milah knife, right? So that we said you can't move it directly. You could move it indirectly, but not directly, right? Like you can kick it, stuff like that. Okay. Yes. So that's enough time. So obviously, remember the rule of thumb is always leave enough time to go whenever you're going before Shabbat. Don't leave late. Remember, Fridays in our area, people like to travel. People like to go on vacation, like to go for a long weekend, whatever it is. People like to travel. So if you're heading somewhere, you need to calculate that you have to have enough time to get there. So don't leave late. Leave early. Leave significantly early so that you arrive with plenty of time. Sometimes just across the George Washington Bridge is, it could be 2 hours. It's a 30-minute drive till there without traffic. But with traffic, it could be 2 hours. You got to calculate these things ahead of time. Okay, good. Another rule that Chazal made that in order that we should not violate the Melacha of Mav'eer, lighting a fire on Shabbat, is that we may not bathe on Shabbat. The entire body or most of the body with warm water. Warm water is not an option on Shabbat. This is called Gezerat HaBalanim. Gezerat HaBalanim is the following. There was a time when people used the bath on Shabbat, bathhouse. They had public bathhouses. What? Balanim. 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 People would go to the bathhouse and they would bathe, and they would even be done on Shabbat. Remember, there's nothing really wrong with bathing on Shabbat. Just to bathe yourself is no problem. The concern that they had was that, well, how is this water hot? How did it get hot? Oh, you lit this. They would say, we lit it before Shabbat. We lit the fires before Shabbat, and therefore the water is hot on Shabbat, so you could bathe now in water that was heated before Shabbat. Turns out, they checked a lot of these places out. They found out that the people, they were lying, and they were actually lighting the fires on Shabbat. And therefore, the people who were bathing were patronizing these places, were actually allowing for Chilul Shabbat to take place and encouraging it to take place by paying for it. Maybe they paid for it before Shabbat, after Shabbat, they would make arrangements, but the point is that they were paying for people to actually go ahead, or they were using these bathhouses while they were actually lighting the fires on Shabbat. So for that reason, the rabbis made a rule that you may not bathe your entire, even most of your body on Shabbat in warm water, period. Always and forever. On Shabbat, it's forbidden. You may, however, bathe, or you could wash your hands, your feet, and your face with water that was heated up from before Shabbat. Obviously not water that was heated up on Shabbat. When it comes to non-heated water, let's say it's cold water, that you could fully bathe your body. Okay, as long as you're, what's that?
If you have a guest that wants to sleep over for Shabbat and they take showers on Shabbat,
Yeah.
are you allowed to say anything to them, or do you just let them do what they?
It depends on the relationship. It's a complex question. It depends on who it is, depends on the relationship, it depends on what will their reaction be, how will there be,
They'll get angry.
it depends. Yeah, there are a lot of different elements that that make a difference to answer the question. Okay, very good. So that's important as well. Again, so what do you do when you need hot water? Now, this is something that happens all the time. Baby throws up all over the place, God forbid, gets himself filthy, dirty. You gotta bathe the baby, right? You can't just let it sit in the throw up, right? So what do you do? So that's why we have beautiful hot water urns that are heated up for Shabbat, ready to go. Get yourself a nice big hot water urn. What you do is you put some hot water into a bowl or a netilat yadayim cup or something. Then you pour some cold water into it so that it becomes not so boiling hot, it's lukewarm. And that way you have warm water to bathe the baby. I mean, it's maybe not the most convenient thing, but at least you have a nice way to bathe the baby. It's something, you can bathe the baby or whatever it is, a child that got filthy, etc. Somebody who's ill, same idea. Because again, you can't really heat up the water on Shabbat. Good. Okay. All right, guys, I think we're done for tonight. Thank you very much. Tizku mitzvot. And wishing you all a Shana Tova U'Metuka, Ktiva V'Chatima Tova, sweet new year to everybody. May it be a year of blessing, success in all areas, and we should meet again, Hashem, to continue learning the Torah of Hashem. Thank you so much for joining us. Chazakim.